Hey, good morning, everyone. So today is very much going to be kind of a conceptual lesson where we're going to really emphasize what it is we're solving for when the question says solve. But there's a few things we need to make sure we're clear on before we can do that. So the first thing I want you to think about is what is a point? And at its most basic level, we're saying it's a location on the graph, and we measure it by saying where is it along the x-axis and where is it along the y-axis. So just remember that your horizontal axis, your left and right, that one's your x-axis. Your up and down axis, that's your y-axis. So if I take a look at this point, I want to say, where is it along the x and where is it along the y? So if I go along my x-axis, it's out at 3, and so my point here is going to be at 3. And now, same thing, I want to say, where is it along the y? It's up, looks like it's on that 2. So my point here would be 3, 2. All right, so that's the big idea. Now, this next piece is saying a graphical solution. So basically, if I have two variables, I'm trying to find a point that lies on that line or that curve. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. The big thing is that whatever we solve for using algebra can actually be seen graphically. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. So we're going to break this into two problems here. One where I give you x and say find y, and one where I give you y and say find x. So here's my equation. And now I'm saying solve for y when x equals 4. So in other words, I'm replacing my x with 4, and I want to know what y is. All right, so just follow my order of operations. -4 times 4, -16 plus 9, and we should get y equals +7. Not so bad, it's what we've been doing all along. But now let's take a look at what that means graphically. Wrong screen. All right, so let's say, I'm going to turn this off. All right, so let's say I have, sorry, cleaning things up a little bit. All right, so let's say we said x is 4. So I'm going to use my slider here, and I'm just going to go to x equals 4. I can't see it right now. It's definitely below that, so I'm just going to click and drag, or you could always use your zoom option. And notice how, oops, should have been -7. Silly me. All right. So notice how when x equals 4, if I travel all the way down to my line, I can see that the y value is -7. So what I'm trying to get at here is when I'm solving and I give you an x value and say find the y value, those two numbers represent the point for -7. So that point is a solution along my line. So with that said, let's take a look at this case. Instead, I'm saying y is 13, but I want you to find out what x is. So let's throw a 13 in for y. All right, so I'll just clean that up a little bit just to make it easier to see when we're solving. So notice how we now have to worry about both sides of the equation, but we know how to handle that. So I'm just going to subtract 9. It's going to be 4 equals -4x. Remember, that's -4 times x. So if I want to just have x left, I'm just going to divide by -4, divide by -4, and we get -1 is equal to x. All right, so let's just a reminder, I gave you y, we solve for x. Let's make sure that that matches what we see graphically. So ignore me for a second here. All right, cool. And let's unlabel that, label that, cool. All right, so now I want to say my y value is 13. Let me allow that to happen. So now I'm going all the way up to y equals 13. And let's go ahead, take a look at our graph. Let's move, move, move. Notice how when y equals 13, my x value is -1. And so all I'm doing is taking my slider here and moving until I get my y value to the correct thing. And I'm making sure that that point where they cross matches exactly what I solved for. So sure enough, that's great. So the point that this solution represents is x is -1, y is 13. That's it. So I want you to get used to the idea that whatever you solve for has some matching component graphically. All right. So if you're comfortable with that idea, let's take a look at example 2. Example 2 is exactly the same idea, but I brought in the idea of having an x squared term. But nothing changes. It's the same thing. It's just now I have to say there's multiple x's. So I just have to put 0 in more than one spot. So once again, I'm saying solve for y when x is 0. We have it. So now I'm just going to simplify. 0 to the second power means 0 times 0. So that's nice. That's just 0. 2 times 0, that's just 0. And then -8. So we get that y equals -8. Well, what point does that represent? Well, I said x is 0 and y is -8, so 0, -8 would be the point. So now let's go back to the graph and let's verify. All right, I have this crazy looking graph. I'm just going to clean things up a little bit so it's a little bit clearer what I'm talking about. All right, so now let's take our slider and let's get it to x equals 0. And what do you know? That point right here is 0, -8. And that exactly matches the point that I said we just solved for. All right, cool. So I'm going to flick these around again. You won't have to do this for your assignment, so don't worry about that. All right. Oops. Label, label, unlabel. Cool. That looks great. All right. Shift this a little bit. All right. So now my second piece of this is here's x, or sorry, find x, here's y. So once again, I'm saying some number for y should equal this. That number is -5. Now, well, let's write it out. Some of you might be uncomfortable with the way this is written because the equal sign is over here. If you don't like that, if things are equal in one direction, they're equal in the other direction. So if you like this better, you can always just write this as x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals -5. That's totally okay. It's not necessary to do that, but some people aren't comfortable with the equal sign on the left side when they're doing x squared solving. All right, so real quick, in order to solve this, remember, I need one side to be equal to 0. That's what we talked about last class. So all I'm going to do is make sure to add 5 to both sides so that I now have x squared plus 2x, now minus 3, equals 0. All right, So now I can factor this. Get x squared, -3. And for this one, I'm just going to tell you what the factors are. We're going to have x and x, and we're going to have +3 minus 1. Because that's going to be a +3x, and that's going to be a -1x. So feel free to verify, but these two factors will work. And so now what I have is x + 3 times x - 1 equals 0. So now, because of this, I'm betting there's two solutions. So if I'm thinking about what values can go in for x to make all this 0, I'm betting a -3 is going to work, because that'll get me 0 times -4 equals 0, which is definitely true. So x equals -3 is one option. And let me get a little bit more space here. Our second possibility, hopefully some of you see it by now, is going to be +1. Because although this box isn't going to be 0, 1 minus 1 will be 0. And 4 times 0 is definitely 0. Make this fit. So that's great. So x equals 1 is a second possibility. All right, so let's just write these as points. So the nice thing is the y value was -5. It just got us two answers for x. And so that means -3, -5 is a possibility. And 1, -5 is a possibility. So we solved for two answers, but both of them happened when x equals -5. So they're both the same y value, but two different x values. So these are my points, and these are the x values we solve for. All right, let's go verify that graphically. So let's look for y. We want to drag until y is -5. Oh, there we go. There's our -3, -5, and there's our +1, -5. And that's it. So I'm just once again verifying that whatever I solve for using algebra, I end up seeing exactly the same graphically. So these solutions all represent points on the graph. All right, good luck with today's assignment. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out.